And let's begin. Welcome to everyone today to the Utah FundMatch webinar. And we're presenting information today on the FundMatch program at WSATA. The FundMatch program is a funding program within WSATA that offers reimbursement up to 50% of eligible marketing expenses in both the domestic markets and international markets throughout the world. Today's presentation will be about 25 minutes long. Please save your questions for the end, put them in the chat, and I'll answer them if need be. Always remember that if you have a special event coming or activity coming that you have questions on, that you can reach out to me personally, and all of my information will be at the end of this presentation. And with that, let's begin. Our agenda today includes how WSATA can help, members, who those WSATA members are, what is FundMatch, program administration, application process, the program timeline, company product eligibility, funding amounts, eligible expenses allowable under ATP and MAP, U.S. origin statement example, common errors, and the claims process. We also have some updates to discuss, how to create your My WSATA account, resources, and questions. Well, how can WSATA can help? We are an independent nonprofit trade association. We have 40 plus years of exporting focus with a global network of resources. We partner with the Foreign Agricultural Service, or FAS, and also the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. In addition to Utah, our member states are Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Guam, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, the Northern Mariana Islands, New Mexico, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. Well, what is FundMatch? Well, the FundMatch program helps Western U.S. food and agricultural companies and suppliers remain competitive internationally by providing 50% reimbursement for eligible marketing expenses. And that includes the domestic market as well. Our funding is administered federal funding from the Market Access Program, or MAP, and the Agricultural Trade Promotion Program, ATP. And with these regulations, WSATA complies with the MAP and ATP funding sources by collecting documentation that is required by those regulations. Well, let's get into the application process. The FundMatch process begins by applying at your WSATA account online, and this will include a $250 non-refundable application fee. Once you've completed the online portion, the claim will prompt you, or the system will prompt you to download the application packet and application summary. There's a checklist in there, and you follow what the checklist says. You sign off on your documents, and then you can return that to us by email. Your application review cannot begin until we receive your signed documentation. Once we've received your documentation, we summarize it into an allocation notice, email it over to you for approval and final review. And then once we receive that back from you, a contract is created and sent to you to digitally sign. And in addition, you receive your 6% allocation fee for your funding to be paid. The company is eligible at this point. The company would be eligible to submit expense claims for your activities. And I always like to remind companies that if you have to have your contract in place and be contracted with FundMatch prior to your event or activity. There's some important days or dates within the year for FundMatch. August 1st of each year, applications open for the following year. So for instance, this year, when applications open, it's for 2024 applications. I just got a notice today that we're going to be a little late in opening applications till September 1st because we are automating the whole process. So it will be very helpful for you at the end of that, but it might be a little late rolling out. So I want to make you aware of that. The FundMatch contract and your claim activities, they're reimbursed on a calendar year from January 1 to December 31. And that means that your activities must be conducted and completed within the calendar year. The last day of February of each year is a big day because it's the last date that you can submit claims for the prior calendar year. And so there's always a big push on that day to get those claims in. And April 1st of each year, the end of year survey for FundMatch is due. And that is part of your contract as well to complete that. Your company eligibility. To be eligible for FundMatch or for WSATA, you must be headquartered in the WSATA region. You must be a small company that is under 500 employees, operating for at least 12 months, and legally licensed within your state. The next piece is your product eligibility. You know, we vet your products for eligibility in the program. The products must be 50% US grown ingredients. You must retain brand ownership of your products. And the US origin statement will be required on your international ingredients as well. And the origin statement, you know, you'll hear a lot about the origin statement in the FundMatch program. It's kind of the cornerstone of our program. And, you know, we want to market US made, US sourced, you know, products to the world. And so part of that is making sure that we are identified when we're out in those activities. If you'll notice, this is page 15 of the guide, and there's 4 areas that have a green check mark, and that means that those are acceptable. You cannot change how they're written at all. They have to be presented this way in your booth. That would be product of the USA or product of America, grown in the USA or grown in America, made in the USA or made in America, or you can have it by the state. For instance, product of Utah, it would have to be spelled out completely as in these states here. I always recommend companies to look over this whenever they're preparing for an activity so they can kind of get it into their minds of how they will be demonstrating their origin statements in their activity. The next area in your application will be the amount of funding that you want. In the first year of participation with the FundMatch program, you can have up to $2,500 to $25,000 in funding, depending on what your marketing budget is. If you're an experienced exporter, that amount can be $2,500 to $50,000. And once you've been with FundMatch over a year, it can be $2,500 up to $300,000, and that depends upon your marketing budget. I always like to kind of talk about an example of a funding request because you're going to get to this area in the online application. It's going to have you kind of set a budget. So the minimum amount of funding is $2,500. If you determine that you want to set a marketing budget for Expo West, say for example next year, you would set that budget at $5,000. 50% of that is $2,500. At the time you sign your contract with FundMatch, you will be charged an allocation fee at 6%, which is $150 on $2,500. And this is just an example for you to calculate. And please refer to this webinar, when you're going through your application process, just to remind you of how that should be. Also, keep in mind that you can add funding and country markets throughout the year. For example, if your costs for Expo West will be $10,000, you can certainly, budget for that. And if you don't have enough funding, say, for example, you just put the $2,500 in place and you would like to have additional funding, we'll simply give you an email and let you know what that difference is, and we'll process it that way. Now, once you have your contract in place and you're ready to do your activities, these are some of the activities that are covered. And I have like 2 slides for international expenses and 1 slide for domestic. Domestic's a little bit more limited than the international expenses are. Some of those are advertising, print ads, TV ads, radio, moving ads, billboards, online social media, e-newsletters, website and web page production that is focused to a particular country market. It wouldn't be able to be a .com. It would have to be that internet country code. In-store demonstrations or in-store displays, international trade seminars, and of course, international trade shows, which include all of your booth fees and expenses and your travel, airfare, lodging, and meals. And keep in mind that all of these expenses would be subject to that origin statement and your brand promotion during any of those activities. Some of the other items that are covered for your international expenses are freight and shipping. One of them is to potential international customers, like for samples, if you had shipping of samples, or to and from the trade shows as well. Outbound trade missions are also eligible for reimbursement through Global Connect, the USDA, and the SRTGs. Label and packaging modifications. We actually have a webinar coming up next week on this. Making changes to your product packaging and labels to meet a foreign country's requirements, that is also an eligible reimbursement. Uniforms, wages for temporary labor and translation. And on pages 34 to 78 in the guide, that's kind of the area where all of the international and domestic expenses are discussed. Now, in the domestic market, some of the eligible expenses only come from a pre-approved domestic trade show list. Like, for example, on that trade show list, they have Winter Fancy Food, Expo West, Expo East. There's probably at least 40 out there, maybe even 50. in the guide, and that is on pages 75 and 76. So you just check that guide when you're making any domestic plans for a domestic show. With your domestic show, that includes freight and shipping to and from the show. It includes your booth fees, your product showcase fees, lead retrieval, rentals for GES and Freeman costs, uniforms that promote your company brand, wages for temporary labor, POS materials, and giveaways. And keep that in mind. You know, with the domestic market and your domestic shows, the origin statement does not have to be present in your activity. However, I always kind of recommend it, at least so that when buyers go by, they understand where your products are made. We're going to talk a little bit about that origin statement. Again, these next two slides talk about how the origin statement should be presented. And the U.S. origin statement and your brand must be present in all your international activities. Always refer to the guide to kind of get guidance on the specific ones that apply to you. That would include photos. You know, most of it does include photos, like photos of your demos or your displays or that type of thing. And that needs to include, those photos need to be all encompassing, and they need to include your origin statement and brand name. A sign or placard must be on your podium or table with the incorporated branding and must be easily identified in photos. And keep in mind that if you're in the USA Pavilion, that doesn't satisfy the requirement of having an origin statement in your booth space. So keep that in mind when you're making your plans. And this is just a little display slide that shows, you know, kind of what direction to go to. For example, if you wanted reimbursement for these banners, you need to be sure that your brand and origin statement are present. It must be present on the podium, remember, but say you wanted to do that back panel as well, it would need to have that. So if you have any special circumstance or any special questions about this, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Okay, we're going to talk about the most common reasons claims are ineligible. I think it's important to address this because you can kind of tell it's real consistent. No origin statement is present, then none of the expenses are eligible. No brand promotion, no, not eligible. If there's no proof of activity or proof of payment supplied in the claim, that's not going to be eligible. And if you have unapproved products in your booth or an activity, keep in mind that that might subject your entire activity to proration, which means that, say, for example, you had 4 products at the show, 3 of them were approved, that'd be 75%. And so say you had $5,000 in expenses, 75% of that would be $3,750. That would be the amount paid at 50%, which is $1,875. That would be the difference between $1,875 and if we just paid the regular 50% on the 5,000 would have been $2,500. So keep that in mind. You know, I always suggest our companies to sign on to your WSATA account when you're planning your activities. Be sure your product information looks good out there and that you didn't add a product that you didn't remember to put onto your list, so that when you're doing these and supplying this information in your claims, there's not going to be any proration to it. Another area is travel, and there are certain guidelines to travel. You have to submit a travel notification form, your lodging, your e-ticket, your quote, that type of thing. So if If that information isn't there, then it won't be eligible either. All of the travel would be ineligible. So what this results in is that, whenever you get to the point of making plans, for example, for an international trade show, just set up a consult with me, or you can reference our guide at any time, and it gives very specific instruction as to how these activities should be handled. Now, this is the claims process timeline. So the company, once you've completed your activity, the company submits the reimbursement claim within 60 days of the last day of the show or the last day of the activity. WSATA receives the claim and will review it within 30 days of submission. If the claim is incomplete, WSATA will request documentation, and the company has 15 days to provide the requested documentation. If the claim comes in and it's complete, then we simply forward it for processing and payment, and it can take about 14 days to distribute that payment. We have a couple of things coming up here. This is claim submission. Now, currently you can mail in your claims to this address in Vancouver, Washington, 4601 Northeast 77th, Suite 240, and send it attention FundMatch claims. But keep in mind that the good news is we are switching to online claim submission, which will be fully online this fall, and that's coming up pretty quick, and we're very excited about it. So just keep an eye on your email. We'll be notifying companies of these changes that are coming up, and companies will have training in this, and we're very excited. So keep that in mind. But until then, you can also email claims, completed claims, in a single PDF to fundmatch@wasata.org. And if you're not already a WSATA participant, you can create a WSATA account online by going to www.wasata.org and clicking on the Sign Up tab in the right-hand corner. And you'll fill out your company information. You'll begin by answering questions about the origin of your products. You will identify your US products and your regional trade focus, and then you enter the contact details for you and your company. It takes a day or so to vet your company and then once you're approved, you have access to the WSATA website and all of those resources that are out there. Some of those resources include the FundMatch guide, example claims, and liaison consults with me. So keep that in mind as well. Also, there are links to all of our webinars and all of our important forms. And this brings us to the end of our webinar today. This presentation will be uploaded and accessible on our website in a couple of days. You may sign off from the webinar as you need to currently. You will receive a follow-up email with the slides and links for reference. And please feel free to call and email me with any questions that you have to discuss your particular event or activity. And again, I thank you so much for meeting you and giving this presentation today. And let's check to see if we have any questions out there. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions
Diana,
yet.
sorry,
Yes.
This is Tamara Watson with Utah Zone. I did a FundMatch through a small company that I was before I was at Utah Zone. I have a question on the travel, so that they
Okay.
could contact you prior to travel. We did it for the fancy food show. do they need to reach out to Wasada before travel and get approval on those quotes, or can it be done post? So
Was
like,
that
let's say they
winter?
file it was Winter Fancy Food Show.
Okay. Well, domestic travel is not covered at all. Only
Okay.
the domestic expenses, like for your booth and lead retrieval, those things that I listed.
Okay.
Only international travel is covered
Travel
to
is covered.
international trade shows, correct?
Hey, thank you for clarifying that, because I
Oh,
know
thank
that
you,
was the
Tamara.
question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, Diana. This is Seyhan from Desiree Chocolate. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. Hey, thanks so much for all the information that you provided. The only
Okay.
question that I have, we sign up a show in Germany, but we don't have a booth. We are just going there and meet with some of the buyers. So do we have a chance to get reimbursed, or do we have to have a booth at the show to get to be eligible for the reimburse?
Well, thank you for your question. Walking the show is not an eligible expense. You must exhibit at these trade shows or outbound missions. So that would not be eligible, unfortunately.
No, thanks so much for the information. Appreciate
You
that.
bet. Thank you.
So this is David with CASA, and I have a question as well.
Hi, David.
So I know we have some domestic trade shows that are internationally focused, like Expo West, Expo East, right?
Mhm.
So is that something where I could go to that, get reimbursement with my Made in the USA, even if it didn't translate into international sales?
Oh, yes. The good news is, David, is at your domestic shows, you don't have to demonstrate the origin statement. It's never a bad idea not to, but it's not a requirement. Not like if you went to Anuga, for instance, which is an international show. You would definitely have to have your origin statement present there. But for the domestic shows, that is not required.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. Thank you for the question.
This is Jeannie.
Diana,
Oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead, Jeannie.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for doing these webinars. I've been participating and I've spoken with you and Chloe multiple times. Just like as a success record, last year we received $54,000 in reimbursement. So I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you, because it has been an extremely successful program for our company.
Oh, thank you so much for that feedback, Jeannie.
Diana, Tamara again with Utah's Own. I know that you probably covered this briefly in your Wasada qualifications, but the U.S. grown ingredient, for those that are maybe not familiar with agriculture background or U.S. grown ingredients, I know that water doesn't qualify and
Right.
packaging doesn't qualify, but do things like salt qualify?
No, they don't. Salt
Okay.
does not. That's a very good question, Tamara, and a very good question, clarification. You receive an origin calculation sheet for each one of the products that you have. It does not include salt, does not include water, does not include, those mineral, type things. So if you have any questions about your products, please send them individually to me so I can get a good view of each one, or Chloe too. Chloe's our manager in our department, and she can check that out for you. That is one of the areas that's really important to the FundMatch program, and it's one that we take pretty seriously because of the regulations. So thank you for your question. I appreciate that.
So can I ask a follow-up question to that? This
Sure.
is David Eaton with CASA. So the reason why I'm asking this question is, a good 30% of our product is actually salt.
Okay.
Some of our other ingredients are citric acid, which is a domestic product, as well as like sodium bicarbonate. So is it any of these chemical ingredients become ineligible for the program?
Well, that would probably be eliminated from your calculation. And probably, what type of product is it, David?
We create bath bombs.
Okay, So it would probably, that would be really interesting. I would like to see that on an individual basis and maybe have you complete an origin statement form.
Okay.
And yeah, leave me your information. I can obtain your information. That's not a problem. And I will send you that origin calculation sheet, and you'll be able to single out what doesn't count and then list what does.
Yeah, because I think about 90% of our ingredients are actually domestic, but they're, salt out of the Great Salt Lake, Arm& Hammer's baking soda, Cargill's citric acid, and then
Right.
safflower out of San Francisco.
Right. Right. Definitely that's something we would have to look at on an individual basis.
Okay.
Thank you for that, David.
No, thank you for the information.
Well, any other questions for anyone? Well, thank you to the State of Utah Department of Ag for, being here today and hosting this for your companies. And we so appreciate all of you. We want you to know that feel free to reach out to me individually if you have any further questions or need any other support with our programs. And thank you so much for your time today.